going fast. Get going fast.
So obviously one of the great things about AI is we can pretty much create whatever we want. Some people think that's great and other people have a real problem with that. However, OpenAI has decided to kind of open up the doors and let us do our adulting on our own. So let's pop into this article and find out a bit what's going on. Yo. All right, well, let's pop on over to this article here at Futurism. It's called OpenAI Says It Will Move to Allow Smut, which is, you know, a funny word. Smut's a funny word. It is smut, but it's a kind of a loaded word, and then kind of tongue-in-cheek, but kind of showing you the tone where this article is going to go. It says, Gooners, take your marks. So now that kind of lets you know right off the bat where this is gonna go. But I will say, as perhaps like not so wonderful as not safe for work stuff can be, it is certainly something that is a reality. I'd say the vast majority of people that are getting into AI, they're curious. They want to see a little bit of booby. They want to see what they can do. They're curious, like what can it actually do, right? And so it's obviously something that's very real. But obviously when we get into, the actual adult, I'm sitting here skipping around words so that I don't get censored on here. But when we actually get into the full adult content here, obviously there is social constructs which are not bad and constrictions which are not bad. But let's go ahead and take a look at this article and figure out what's going on, okay? So it says 8 months ago, OpenAI, the company behind ChatGPT, all right, moved to relax some of its restrictions around naughty contents in its model spec. The document describing how its large language models, LLMs, ought to behave, okay? The ought is really key thing here. This is one of the big things with all this stuff is the ought. Who comes up with the ought? Okay, so obviously we have social constraints that are good, but the battle generally in culture goes over who gets to define the oughts and the nots. So sort of an interesting key. Keep that in mind. Okay, so a noteworthy change from its previous stance prohibiting all sexual content. So in other words, if you go to ChatGPT and you say, hey, even if you say, give me a picture of a man and a woman and they're kissing and embracing and he grabs her by her hips and you don't mention anything, it's going to flag it, okay? And we can talk a little bit later on about how it flags it. It's quite actually fascinating. But it's very constrictive on anything that could be construed as that. Now, the question comes as to why, and the why, of course, is because you're talking about a publicly traded company that lots of people have access to. You got teens have access to it. You have small kids have access to it, and so they have to create something that is not going to be putting out stuff that's going to offend parents. Okay, I'm a strong believer of that. You shouldn't have this stuff just anywhere that kids can find it. I mean, now I will say it's everywhere. You go to Netflix, you can't, or you go to Disney Plus or whatever, and your kids are going to be finding this stuff, okay, being pushed on them, okay? So even if it's not necessarily visual, kids are sexualized. And it's definitely an argument that something we need to figure out. But that all being said, the reason ChatGPT has these structures in here is because they don't want to get sued, they want lots of people. So at any rate, your customers. So let's go on. To maximize freedom for our users, only sexual content involving minors is considered prohibited. Okay, so that's good. We'll get more to that as well. So it's not a thing where there's like you create whatever you want. There's obviously still going to be rights and wrongs that you cannot do. So to users who have spent months begging OpenAI and its CEO Sam Altman to relax restrictions around AI-generated smut, it was a welcome change. Yet, as some noted, the model itself wasn't so quick to adjust. The filters eased up a bit. I'll give you that. This is what they're quoting someone. But ever since a month ago, it's back with a clever trick called metaphoric obfuscation and drawing a clear line at the mention of depicting explicit scenes, which it does. If you go to ChatGPT right now and you ask it to describe something, not only will it not, it can't. Okay, so what they're saying is that in the past, ChatGPT and OpenAI said they're going to open it up, but they haven't. Okay, what happens right now, just kind of interestingly enough, is say you throw in a picture and you say describe it. It not only won't describe the image, it can't. It flags it, and before it sends it off to its other things to process the image, it just completely trashes it. So all that the GPT ends up knowing is that this was a sexual image, but it doesn't even see it. Okay, so it gets thrown out before it, the decision is made before GPT itself can even look at it, which is interesting, which means there's a small little GPT over here looking at it, but the one that we're interacting with doesn't even get it. Okay, now, so that's kind of a hear no evil, see no evil, speak no evil sort of thing. Okay, so it seems ChatGPT users may finally get what they demanded. The company announced it will soon open the floodgates for mature apps as soon as it rolls out its equally long-awaited verification system. Okay, and this is a big thing. Of course, how are you going to keep kids from looking at it? Now, I'm going to just come out real quick and say it's not going to be too terribly hard because we already have a bunch of age verification systems in place. But they're going to need to put one in here that can't be put down. Now it says, now here they get a little bit on the side of things. So it's an interesting strategy with some cause for alarm. Elon Musk's Grok. Okay, now they say it's an infamous example, which, see, that's a political statement. If you honestly, if the way that things have really come out with this stuff is if you vote politically left, you don't like Grok, you don't like Elon Musk, you don't like X, all that stuff. Okay, I'm making broad strokes, but at least here in the USA, they're really not that broad. It really does come down to it. If you tend to be conservative, you're like, hey, you like Elon Musk and Grok and all that because they took away what was considered it wasn't even considered, it was a stranglehold. One side of politics owned the ought and owned the not, and Grok kind of took that away now, or Elon did. So they kind of use this word infamous, so you got to understand the leaning that this is coming from. So what can happen when it opens the smut gates on AI, which quickly became a haven for exploitation and inappropriate AI-generated imagery of children? Now, that's not really true. If you go research into that, everything has two sides to it. And I tell you what, if you go to Grok right now, you cannot get flesh. You can't get it. It won't create it, okay? Now, elsewhere on the internet, lesser-known AI systems have led to a noxious outbreak of AI-generated deepfakes that depict the likeness of real people in explicit situations without their consent. Okay, so they're concerned about, putting Hollywood faces on something or other. Now, while it remains to be seen how ChatGPT fares in its adult era, the smut debacle isn't the first. Users have noted a gulf between what OpenAI says and what its LLMs do. Okay, so they're basically saying, they're kind of calling it on OpenAI and saying, you may say this one thing, but it's not necessarily what you're doing, okay? Now, for example, Altman and his company have come under increasing pressure by watchdogs, regulators, and the media to address ChatGPT's sycophancy as the overly agreeable chatbot increasingly leads vulnerable users into dangerous mental health spirals. Okay, we're getting off key here, but basically, if you talk to ChatGPT, it actually kind of helps you get into a what do they call that? A glass room, a bubble. So it's like, oh yeah, I totally understand that. Oh, that's great, and just agrees with you, and it kind of leads you down this path of. It never says no. It never says, well, I'm actually concerned about what that might be. So you're talking your mental health, and you go, well, I actually don't think I should take my pills, right? And it might be like, actually, that's right. It really depends on how you feel. And if you feel that you're great, so it could give you real bad advice. And so they're concerned. They're going to try and tie that into the adult stuff here. But let's go on. So 2 months after it received a grim warning from Stanford researchers, OpenAI released a hot fix for ChatGPT, claiming it would solve a number of issues causing unintended harm. Yet, as futurism noted at the time, the announced changes were like a Band-Aid fix compared to the kind of robust safeguards many had been calling for. Part of the problem plaguing companies like OpenAI is that once LLMs are up and running, they're pretty difficult to tweak, okay? And that's just because you have to train them, all right? And it takes a lot of money to train them, a long time to train them. Some even perform worse on certain benchmarks than their predecessors, which is what we saw with the latest GPT. It just stinks. But whatever. On the other hand, that may be a convenient excuse to delay much needed safety updates. Okay, so they're kind of being a little crafty here, and they're saying they're actually calling ChatGPT out and saying, "Oh, maybe there's something nefarious going on." I mean, after all, they're a big business, and they do all this shady stuff. So they're kind of throwing out that maybe OpenAI wants you to get hurt. Ooh. Okay. OpenAI is also a notoriously secretive company whose operating decisions are now likely influenced by national security hawks in the Pentagon. Okay, one thing's for certain, if OpenAI does open its services up to adult-oriented developers, expect a prolonged moderation crisis as it grapples with what should really be allowed and the nastier side of virtual erotic material. Okay, so we have gotten through the article here. Now, essentially, this is obviously kind of a negative article, and my bet is that this is going to be people that are more on the line of like, well, I believe in freedom of speech. I just think that freedom of speech has its limits, which, of course, doesn't mean that you believe in freedom of speech, right? So they're going to be worried about regulation, but there's a few things here that I want to hit on. Okay, not throwing this article away at all, using it as information that this is coming. What this tells me is that there's going to be a fight. There's going to be a battle over what is allowed and what is not allowed, which is always the case with anything that has to do with humans. I worked in a call center years ago, and I brought in my own chair, and there was a fight over whether I should bring in my own chair or not, right? And there's people wanting to control where people are parking, so there's always an element of humanity that wants to control. And then there's always an element that says, hey, don't control. And without being too simplistic, usually, you have to take things at a balance, okay? You want to find some things need a little control, some things you just need to stay back, right? And usually there's no one fits all sort of thing. And the issue with freedom of speech or freedom of expression is that it is messy, okay? So whereas what happens is people that get tired of the mess, they want to just say, well, there's inherently something that's wrong with freedom of speech, and so therefore, or freedom of expression in this case, something's inherently wrong with that idea, so therefore, because it has a mess, right? The mess is the example or is the proof that there's a problem with it, but you tend to not take into account the things that it fixes, okay? So you take, everyone, takes medications for their heart or for their diabetes or for their, for their whatever, for their adult theme issues, and there's always side effects to everything. There's nothing really in this world that doesn't have side effects, and so when you do these things, you typically have to take into account the things that are being fixed and the problems that come with it. When we come to issues of freedom of speech or freedom of expression, the things it fixes are much greater than the mess it makes. I'm not saying it doesn't make a mess, but the truth of the matter is there's a reason that freedom of speech is so important in thriving democracies and in Western civilization, in the growth of economies and the freedom of people to just sit back and listen to rock and roll music and drink a Coca-Cola. All of those things are expressions of freedom of speech and them being an integral part of our society. So first of all, we just have to understand that as messy as things go, it's definitely a conversation that is worth having. Okay, free speech versus regulation is always an issue that is worth having. Now, I do want to acknowledge here that there are always, there are always limits, okay, to certain things. Now, one of the things that this article is not mentioning, notice what it's not saying. It's not saying that you can be able to create whatever you want. Notice it says there's going to be limits on generating children, which there should be. Throw the freaking perverts out, do something with them. I'm not going to say but you got to cut that stuff out, okay? Notice it also, I'm going to bet that there's not going to be allowed horror. I always said the word, now I have to cut it out. There's not going to be horror stuff in there. There's not going to be abusive stuff. What you're going to end up with is, a fleshy gal showing her parts while holding a kitten, or, making love to a man, that's what we're talking about here. And when you see that stuff, how it's already worked on society, that's pretty much the idea of what you can get. There are certain things that are still completely taboo in society, and you're not going to touch those things. There are certain things that there are already laws about, and those laws, regardless of AI, will maintain. If you have images of children on your computer, you will go to jail, even if you generated them. Okay? It's bad. It's gross. Don't do it. Society has said, AI or not, it's not acceptable, and you'll go to jail. So these kind of things are going to carry over to what's happening here. Okay, so this isn't a free for all. Like, oh my God, they're just gonna let it all out, and it's just gonna be like Roman orgies in the streets, times 3 or something like that. That's not what we're talking about. Okay, so obviously there's still going to be digital law enforcement. There's going to be all this stuff, but there's nuance that is going to be had. Do not fall into the trap of what you're going to get of people wanting to make this binary thing of saying like, oh, well, you're like this, well, then that must mean this. It's A or it's B. It's black or it's white. If you do this, you must be like this. That's obviously dumb thinking, okay? That's not thinking, okay? And there are a lot of people that do that because it works when you want to push your way. You just villainize the other people, you cut down debate, and you say the other side is like this. Obviously, this isn't one of those things. Okay. Now, what about the whole idea of adult stuff anyways and adult pages? Is it good? Is it something that we should have in society? Well, listen, you're not going to get me arguing for more of this kind of stuff. I grew up in an age when there was no adult bookstores downtown. I remember when I was a kid and they put up the first adult video place in our town. And it was a big thing. People did not want it there, okay? But the argument was like, well, you can't not have these things. They got to be there and blah, 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 blah. And that was kind of the start of what entered these things into society. And so I get the more, and now we're at a place, and then you get like, all over TV. Come on, guys, like the TV show Friends, they love sitting there and watching adult TV shows. If you watch Friends, that was Joey in them. They love something that was a great. Oh yeah, we're gonna watch this Triple X movie here, and they made it popular. And the more you accept it, the more it comes. And then we end up in this crisis of adult stuff everywhere, and then we end up here at this argument. So I get it. Okay, there is a growth of having this stuff that causes issues. Now, it could go either way. On one hand, we've got these hubs and these X video type places all over the internet. On one level, letting people just create their own stuff, it could bring down the demand for those other sites. Okay, so maybe those people aren't pushing it as much. You're not going to these sites. That's definitely a possibility. It could take the market away from it. At the same time, it can create more of a demand. Okay, so that's always the argument with these things. So you can go back and forth on whether you think it's good or not. I do think that at the end of the day, with this, it's something that we just can't stop. It's just not going to stop. It's the way that society is society wants certain things, okay? And what is it? It said politics is the art of giving the people what they want, good and hard, okay? So in other words, fine, you want it, you got it, okay? And the truth is that people in mass, they want this kind of stuff. So I don't think it's going away, which brings us to the broader conversation of how do we actually handle this stuff. And again, I've mentioned this before in the past. How we need to handle this is we need to bring back public spaces, okay? In the past, there was very much a line between your private life and your public life, okay? If you were going to the store, you dressed up. You made yourself look good, okay? You wanted to put out a view to the rest of the public that you weren't an absolute slub. Now, of course, we can go to Walmart in a bikini if you want. You can go in your pajamas. We've all seen the videos, And listen, and we've all put on absolute garbage clothes and just gone out because we're lazy, because our private lives blend out into the public space. All right. And this is where the issue of adult stuff comes in, is one person comes out there and they're doing something that is totally inappropriate because there's kids around, and they say, who the hell are you to tell me not to do it? And, you know, for me, it's fine if my kids like it. Maybe your kids are prudes, or maybe you got a secret fantasy about it, so you're coming again. And all these arguments have been here to completely devastate the public space. All right, which is why you can watch Disney Plus, or you can watch Netflix, and you can see some really offensive stuff that you can't really get because there's no public space. My belief is that if we continue in the path of reasonable progression, pushing into free speech, pushing into freedom of expression, what we're going to do is that the market will naturally bring back the public and private space. Right now, if you want to go out and drink a fifth of whiskey, you can't do it in public unless you're homeless. Then you can do it in public because then you know you're a hero. But if you have a job and you're not homeless and you want to go out and drink a fifth of whiskey in the park, you're not going to get allowed. You're not going to be allowed to do that. You got to go to a bar. Okay, you won't go flirt with girls and smoke a cigarette and chat it up and do that. You're going to go to a bar. You're going to go to an adult place where you can do that. Okay, so those things are already there. You're not going to go to Central Park and do it. You're not going to go down to the river where there's a bunch of kids and sit there and act like you would in a bar, because there's differentiation between these things. And we used to have that, and what I'm suggesting is that has collapsed. Okay, when I look at this article about OpenAI and I look at it and I say, what is going on with this stuff? What I say is, on one hand, I'm like, you know, it's good, because at the end of the day, if you want to see a girl's boobies, you should be able to see a girl's boobies, okay? It's like, if you're an adult, okay, you don't need someone telling you you can't, especially when it's everywhere in society anyways. They're pushing it all on you everywhere, and they say, oh, if you go here, it's great, and there's over here where kids are, it's great, but oh, no, over here, you can't do it, over here, it's bad. Okay, so that obviously is arbitrary, and it honestly, it gets businesses involved in the morality of issues. Okay, so which is what's happened over the years. We've got the businesses into the ought and into the not. What we need to do is we need to let the markets figure it out. Okay, if Chat GPT goes up here and it lets adult content get in here and it affects their bottom line, you know what they're going to do? They're going to say no. Okay, and I tell you what, if ChatGPT gets into the adult stuff and it actually crosses lines that actually have legal lines, they're going to get sued. Okay, and they're going to lose money, and they're going to make a change. And you're going to get some companies that open up and say, hey, you know what, we are adult oriented, and we know, like a bar, okay? You can't go into a bar if you're under 18. Okay, or under 21, I guess. You can't do it, and they know it, and they're allowed to exist. Okay, but you can go into a McDonald's, okay, at any age. You could go into it at pretty much at any age on your own. You could be a 10-year-old and walk into a McDonald's on your own, because there's very much difference between the market of what each of these companies are going for. Okay, so rather than getting one blanket rule over this, what's going to end up happening, or what needs to happen, is that we're going to allow the market to sort this out. This is adult. This is not adult. This is public domain. Keep the adult stuff out of the public domain. Okay? Keep it family friendly over here. And we got to define what family friendly means. Okay? And again, the market and the politics are going to figure that out. Okay, but what we need to avoid is the thought of regulations which come in and just say, oh, you know, this is a blanket solution for all. These are the morals. This, which is, by the way, why we have the whole thought of freedom of speech, because humans come in and they say, this is the morals. And then they put it down and they oppress. Okay, and those might not be the right morals. We see that in the USA. You got both sides talking about how garbagey the other side's morals are, but really there's one group of people that actually really want to federalize everything and say, let's make it rules so everyone has to act the same way. What OpenAI is doing here is they're moving more to a model of saying we're getting past the corporate censorship. We're going to let adults be adults. Hopefully we're going to do it in a responsible manner in which we have age verification. If you go to a concert that's in a pub, you have to show ID. So they're figuring out these ways as well. They have these things already in place on the internet. This is not a big deal, okay? The technology exists, okay? So, it's a mixed bag on this whole thing. Do we need more adult content in the world? We don't. We need people that are more faithful to one woman, one man, to their kids, to not being led by their hormones, but to being led by rational thought and reasonable thought, and understanding that impulses come, impulses go, but there are certain words that stand for firm. Okay, and we need more of that. Okay, we need more rational thinking, probably less adult content. Okay, at the same time, it's not going away. Okay, so what we need to do, and as well, should it? Okay, again, because these ideas of freedom of speech are so important and vital there's a reason it's called freedom of speech. They're so vital to the growth of healthy society that we have to allow the mess to take place. And if we are rational and reasonable, and if we're thinking well, which we have done for a very long time, then what we can do is we can figure out ways to contain the mess. Okay? Messes are always going to be there, but the answer is never to say, just throw out the good medication, right? See, my heart medication, it makes me fart, okay? So therefore, I'm going to throw away the heart medication. Or the heart medication makes me dizzy, so therefore, I'm going to throw away the heart medication. No, you continue to work on the heart medication to see how you can mitigate the things that come with it, but you understand that the heart medication itself is so vitally important, okay, that you can't live without it. All right. So we are moving into a time where hopefully companies are going to stop playing the role of censor, stop playing the role of being mom and dad for people that are moms and dads themselves. Okay. And we'll be able to build systems in a responsible manner. And then guess what, guys? Then it's up to you to be responsible. And if you do something that's wrong, guess what? Then you're the one that's going to take the blame for it. Okay? Freedom of speech doesn't always mean freedom of consequence. Okay? So you're going to have access to do stuff, and maybe it's legal, but you think that these companies aren't going to be keeping records? Okay? You run for politics some years later, and they'll be like, hey, look at this stuff that you generated back in the day. So at the same time, be your own captain. Create your own morals. Okay, or don't create, I don't say create your own morals, but find morals that are work. There are systems of morality that are true and trusted, okay, time tested. Go get yourself into that and be your own trainer in these things. Just because you have the freedom to do it doesn't mean you should do it, okay? Just because you can do it doesn't mean it's the best thing that you should do it. But here's the thing, you can do it, okay? And other people can do it, right? That's the beauty. If I'm not going to tell this person, I might be able to give this person my opinion, but I'm not going to force him to not do it. And in the same way, I'm going to expect that he can have his opinion about my life, but he's not going to force me to do it as well. So at the end of the day, hats off to OpenAI. Glad to see this trend happening. We're going to see more and more of this stuff, but at the end of the day, it is a sign that our, I hate to use this term, our democracy is thriving. It's healing. Time heals all, okay? And the toxic waste, okay, of control from regulators, from social regulators, is starting to heal. And we're getting back to a place where we can build actually structures that maintain safety, maintain autonomy, maintain expression, but also keep those things contained so that we can all live amongst each other peacefully. So, all right, well, there it is. You guys have a good one. Let me know what you think about this, your opinions, and as always, you guys be good, and we'll catch you on the other side.